Thank you so much for having me. I'm wondering if people will be able to tell the difference between our voices when if they listen to this on audio.
Oh no, that's exactly right. Welcome to, well, I mean, they should be so lucky to be in the echo chamber of our love. I'm so proud of you, honey. This is such a beautiful book. And what's so fun is we're coming to the end of the New Year, New You season.
Oh.
And it is like peak version of the kind of self that you talk about in this book and that you've spent so much time thinking about. So I wondered if we could start there with the kind of monster that New Year's always creates, which is this producer self. Tell me about the producer self.
Thank you for that. So I offer in the book that we are given this identity in this society as not human beings, not even really defined as strongly by our faith or our socioeconomic status, but by our role as producers of value, of experiences, of an image. And all a producer can do is do. Like, that's the only lever to pull for any problem that life presents. So a new year comes up and you're like, okay, now I'm going to just do things differently. I'm going to work out more. I'm going to eat less of something. I'm going to be nicer, by which they mean I'm going to say nicer things. So it can't actually touch the deeper level of the self, because as producers, we're always thinking about our lives as an opportunity to do more, do less, do better, do differently.
Totally.
The problem with
totally. Right. I remember when I first met my producer self, and it was in the basement of our parents' house. And I think Dad had just bought the book Getting Things Done. And I think the most lethal intervention was this little rule that was like, if you can do something 2 minutes or less, then you have to do it right away. And the problem is that is almost everything that the light touches. But it totally changed me into a very cheerful cyborg who was like very connected to the doing self right away. When did you first meet your inner cyborg?
I love that you bring that story, because I find that a lot of us have two experiences of this producer self. There's the one that actually does it somewhat successfully enough to get to a status quo that is working. And then there is the limits we hit with it. So for example, our dad was always trying to encourage us to be who we wanted to be in his way. And I wanted to be a writer. So he gave me a writing exercise when I was in elementary school, really young. And he gave me a list of objects to incorporate into a story. And I got overwhelmed by that list of objects. And I came to him and said, like, I can't do it. And he said, well, then you'll never be a writer. And what he was trying to do in that moment was say, like, do his tough love thing. But what I heard was, oh, doing equals an identity, like an aspirational identity. So if I could do it, then then I am the person that I want to be. But I couldn't do it. And so now I am experiencing this conflict of like, wait, I want to write, but I can't do this thing. And I feel like that is the origin story of my experience with the pressure to produce, was actually feeling like I had this standard and I just couldn't quite meet it. But I became fascinated with this problem because as a writing teacher, there's a lot you can teach about craft. But when students are trying to express something, there's only so much writing advice you can give until it actually just becomes more burdensome and they're more confused about what it is that they are trying to say and trying to do. So that is why I try to look at the problem as an identity problem and escape the whole, like, let's life hack our way around this and get underneath this distracting level of doing enough.
You had this line that I had to stop and reread a couple times. You wrote, even the best productivity strategy can make you nothing more or nothing less than exactly who you've been before. Yet the sun sets and rises and you are one day older.
Right? I mean, haven't we all had this experience where we've actually achieved with all our doing? We've gotten the better outfit. We've remodeled the kitchen. And we don't feel any different. And then we're like, wait a minute, after the dopamine high is gone, like this was supposed to be the thing that made me the calm person or made me the successful person. And I am the same person. And one of the things that I like to ask people when they have a goal in my work is, okay, great. Like let's say you want to embrace some New Year's resolution. Like maybe you write the book, maybe you have a new routine with your family. Great. Who do you get to be when you're there? So they imagine themselves as being different at the end. So maybe I'll be peaceful because I finally finished this thing, or I get to feel more connected to my family. Great. Yeah. How can we be that and see how you already are that now? And so you're not withholding this way of being that your soul recognizes is for you when you get the result. It's a saying that I heard somewhere, but like the way you are on the way is the way you'll be when you get there. Mm-hmm. So let's think about how we want to be, and not what we want to be doing, but what quality of presence is actually calling to us, because we can cultivate that now. We don't have to wait when we have all the right strategies.
Yours is a nicer version of the wherever you go, there you are. But I do like yours. I like yours better because I think one of the things I struggle with most, and I thought that it would get better after cancer. I really thought it would get better. But the tick feeling that I had before, because of really wanting to achieve things, and it was like driven by hope and ambition and a feeling of vocation. But then after I got sick, it was this like urgency to cram everything in. And you have this great, I like the idea of putting more Nietzsche quotes on cat posters. But the quote, haste is universal because everyone is in flight from himself.
Mm-hmm. Well, and why wouldn't we be in flight from ourselves when we believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with us? Of course we would be. If we are what we do, which is always like never permanent, never solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then we're on unstable ground, and we don't want to spend time with that. Look at that. Like, oh, I'm someone who did maybe medium today. Or
yeah, totally.
I'm someone who didn't clean the bathroom when she said she was going to. And, why wouldn't we speed up our actions to avoid that false identity? Because that feels terrible. But when we're carrying that around, we're going to be moving really fast. And even if we're doing nothing, it's going to feel very urgent.
Yeah. I'm even thinking too of all the people, we have a lot of really beautiful caregivers who are in this community. And I think too, even like the urgency of doing things that are completely necessary and other people depend on, other people depend on me. I have to do this. I don't have a lot of choices. And like, they really probably don't. But then this sort of endless fried feeling of constant motion still, like, even if they're doing the loveliest thing in the world, still kind of like hollows out that center feeling like, well, then I'm only what I do. And then gross, right? And then just feeling gross.
Right. I love how that I take that feeling of emptiness and grossness and see it as evidence that our soul knows better than if we actually were satisfied by doing all the things, then we would always end the day feeling fine. So it's actually beautiful evidence that that's not who we are and that's not going to work. It's not a sign that we're failing, but that's how we interpret it. Even doing all the nice things, even like the things that make other people feel good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I know all the best people I know. They don't often get to have the feelings that they deserve for being the best people I know. What's the difference between like action and hustle? How do you know if you're a hustle monster?
I talk about the difference between hard work and hustle, because hard work comes with life. And
Yes, right.
We've all experienced working hard and it feeling satisfying in some way. Like, this is just, even if we hate it, it just feels, we're not in conflict with the fact that it's hard. We're not in conflict with the reality of the situation. Hustle is, on the surface, could look exactly the same as hard work. But the experience of it is trying to run away from a negative outcome, or from a thought that feels really painful, or you're only thinking about the relief you'll feel when it's over. You're believing that if you do enough things, then you'll avoid the negative outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It's with the feeling is holding your breath when you're hustling.
Yeah. How do I know if, like, so for instance, lots of times with things that are very difficult, like with things, especially with things that I can't change, I speed up a lot. I become significantly more productive. And I think what I want most is just to skip it. Like, I don't want to have the horrible day.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the horrible day, I'm going to prep for a podcast, or like, I'm just trying to like add a lot of things. How can I tell if like shifting into the high gear is serving me or not serving me?
I'm curious, when we're in these moments of wanting to get it over with and shift in high gear, what we're believing about ourselves when our experience is hard. What we're making it mean about ourselves. Because if we're making it mean that we are missing a fundamental piece, that we can't rely on anyone but ourselves, then we can't help but do. It makes perfect sense. And that's not wrong. Just noticing that, oh, this is the level, this is the lever that I can pull. This is like, I'm reaching for kind of the way I know to control things, which is to do things instead of allowing ourselves to check in with what we're making it mean and who we're being.
One of the stories that I really heard in yours was, well, then if I'm not like the hustle monster, then I'm selfish. And do you think selfishness too is, where does the story of selfishness come from, I guess? And is it super duper gendered? Or do men ever feel selfish? Explain them to me.
I can't help but think of selfishness as connected to the belief that the pie is always closed. And that you can calculate all the pieces of who gets what. Like, you somehow have a bird's eye view of all of reality. But the fact is, that is a lie of scarcity that our culture and our economic system want us to believe. That it's always you or me. It's this or that. And of course, to speak to the gendered thing, it's been my experience that people who are in caregiving roles are often have the view of the whole room in their mind. And so there's this sense of everyone else's needs. Their view is just kind of trying to hold it all at the same time. And so in that case, it's very tempting to think you have an understanding of how much like what one person resource can handle. Mm-hmm. And so you avoid, the wheels falling apart on this ecosystem that you have in your mind.
Yeah.
By controlling for yourself, for like not taking up too much.
So we grew up like absolutely inundated with Mennonite culture, and they have this super aggressively anti-nap policy, which makes me laugh so hard. But one of the big stories they have, and because they're such a wonderful maker culture, because they're like little busy bees, if you ask them like, when's the last time you took a nap, like their experience will be the closest thing I think to rage for a peaceable people. I think they feel genuinely not entitled to rest. I wonder how you think we might like be able to modify our feelings that we're like selfish if we take a break.
Right. It's one of my pet peeves that the argument that people usually use for giving yourself permission to rest is that rest is productive. I would just offer that.
Like when you say offer in a math voice, you're like, I would just offer.
Super gently put on the table. That it is part of every life cycle, every living being's life cycle. And there are different forms of rest, and that we will end up taking it in some way. It will come out sideways if we don't do it on purpose. So, there can be social rest, just not like filling up your social calendar. There can be obviously physical rest, mental rest, like tuning out stimulation. But I will find that like it's like a let go or be dragged kind of thing. Like do rest on purpose, or you will find yourselves trying to sneak it in by numbing. That's what the body will do, which is not wrong. It's actually very intelligent of our bodies. But we will find ways of, like we're only like kind of like half present with our people, or we will, just go on autopilot for years on like one particular
for 2 or 3 decades. You have this really funny. You like wouldn't mind some like homework being given to people on this one, which I want you to give me this homework, Maria. When you find yourself taking these breaks, maybe numbing, maybe procrastination, you have a good idea for this.
I love the idea of procrastinating on purpose because the internal difference between rest and procrastination is the resistance to what's happening. So if you're lying down and you feel great about lying down, that's rest. If you're lying down and you're beating yourself up for what you're not doing, the experience of it is procrastination. Yeah. And so telling yourself to procrastinate on purpose is a sneaky way of removing the resistance, which actually shifts it from procrastination into something else. So I recommend doing the thing that you normally beat yourself up for doing while you're procrastinating, so you can see what the experience of it is like on its own without the resistance to it. So let's say you procrastinate by scrolling. But most of us do that unconsciously. Mm-hmm. So if you do purpose, you can actually get a felt sense of how much you enjoy it, what you enjoy about it, how much satisfaction you're getting versus what you're not getting. Your experience of it is now like clean from your, or cleaner
the shame
from the shame
noise.
Exactly.
I like that. I do like that. I think it's funny that we have the same word for creativity without like a objective, but we both say noodling. And like I have a huge noodling policy, and it comes for me from that book, how Tom beat Captain Najork and his hired sportsman. Did you read that one, or did I steal it?
No, I remember the book, but I don't remember the story.
It's this kid named Tom, and he has this horrible aunt named Aunt Fidget Walkumstrong, and with her iron helmet, wherever she walks, the trees shiver. And Tom's constantly like noodling around. He's like throwing sticks but it turns out that everything he does are actually these wonderful things he knows how to do, so that when the aunt hires her, like brings this whole group of people to beat him in a set of games, all of his noodling makes him wildly successful at these games. And so he wins in the end by not trying to win at all.
I mean, ask any I hate this term, but it's fair in this case, high performance person. So athletes, actors, speakers, talking to lots of people. They will always say there is a point where you have to forget what you're supposed to be doing. Like, you do your training, you set your intention, you learned your skills in your muscle memory, and then you have to stop trying, because it is not the doing that makes an impact in the world, that kind of opens up possibility. It's our being, it's our presence. And so not trying is always this key, and it's tricky because you can't try to not try.
Yeah, it's like this weird little slipstream in the middle.
Yeah, you can set yourself up to trust it more and more. It can become kind of like a normal part of life, where like, oh yeah, and this thing happens. Look what happens when I set a vague sense of what I want to do, and then let my presence do the rest.
I know you teach creativity, and I kind of want this magical thing for all the people in this community, because they're so good at all the hard stuff, and like maybe not so hot on hobbies or like, just the bubbly up for no reason. But the second I say for no reason, it makes me want to ask you about why we should live in no reason season.
Well, you just put your finger on it. The reason why it gets hard for a lot of us as adults, even professional quote unquote creatives, it gets hard for us to feel like we are in our in the joy that we know is possible and that we remember. And we might even do the things that are like looking joyful. But this also happens for people who are, professionals, creative people, is that we get too good at knowing what works.
I see.
We get too good at knowing what makes people satisfied. And we also get too good at knowing what the rules of the game are. Like, we know how the sausage is made kind of when we're adults. And we become so familiar with that surface efficacy that everything else starts to feel like a waste of time, or maybe we just forgot that we know how to do things. We know how to be when we're not getting to the result. So,
whoa, yeah. And that could even, like Catherine, one of the great joys of my friendship life, is suddenly very into gardening in a way that is taking up a lot of her space lately. And I think she's very bad at tomatoes, but like, she's doing it. But like, she's all of a sudden a different self because she's just messing around.
Right. And what is fascinating to me is that in different areas of our life, we often get to this moment where we need to ask ourselves, if the result was never going to come, why would we do it? For example, if you suddenly had no audience, and you'd have some intention for this. And
yeah. Like, the podcast is a perfect example. I get to monopolize 1 hour of intimate time with somebody. And the fact that people listen brings me so much joy. But like, I experience discovery. I get an experience that I can't have by myself.
Yeah.
And that blows my mind. And then I would do it, forever.
Yeah, exactly. So if anyone listening, or if you ever reach a point where the room all starts to turn gray, like you're doing the thing, but you're kind of losing your sense of connection with whatever it is you're doing. It could be in any area of your life. Like if, in fact, the result you wanted was impossible, if you could care for people and they would never be satisfied, how would you do it? So that's why I like to play with this idea of like, it's for no reason season, because there's always something. And you might, in some scenarios of your life, it might be, all right, I would do it completely differently. For example, I have a toddler who is very in a stage where she doesn't like most of what I make. And so for a while, that would just kill my experience of cooking. And then I just had to accept that, let's just assume that it was going to be no. And if that was the case, then how would I spend my time in the kitchen? How would I be enjoying it? And it was a lot more fun.
You had this line that I liked so very much. You wrote, "There's no such thing as doing nothing, the great sin of our culture, because there's no such thing as being nothing." That was so lovely to me, because like, if we feel our own belovedness, wouldn't we maybe, I don't know, wouldn't that love just kind of do different things to who we want to be?
Exactly. I think about this in terms of how we actually experience people through the eyes of love. It's never about what they do for us. And anyone who has loved someone with special needs knows so intimately that the being of a person shines completely separate from what they do. Meaning, we know this in our bones already. We can walk out on the street and see someone, and just the look of them, like just how they are, spark something in us, or we feel them. It is, we know it with other people. We look at other people.
We do know. And we think, like, that you're totally right. I imagine that there's a little pressure writing a book about creativity, because then you have to create while you're talking about creativity. Gosh. Did writing this book a little bit scare the crap out of you?
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I met my own producer self real hard writing this book. So I had written it before anyone knew I was writing it, and I had no pressure around it for a long time. And then suddenly there's an editor and there's deadlines, and I had to eat my words while I was writing about it.
You're like, there is grace for all in the what? The what? Why?
Yeah. I found that when eyes were on me, old narratives of what it meant to create under pressure, what it meant to be seen, came up, and it worked its way into the book as well. I was kind of writing the sermon I needed to hear, as they say, and exploring what it meant for me to ask for help in a new way. So when you take on more, it was more than my system was used to. Like the kind of the breadth of the project, the depth of the project was more than my system was used to. And so I had to kind of, at a new level, look at it like, oh, okay, it's easy when there's quote unquote no pressure. Can I believe this when there's the temptation to look at it from an outside perspective, to look at it from, the eyes of a future reader or reviewer?
Yeah, who always hates it. Like in your mind, they're so disappointed. They've actually never read anything worse.
Exactly. It's always like
It's weird. First time.
Exactly. It's always like the meanest former colleague you've ever had. It's always just like
Yeah.
the worst.
Yeah. I do always think about a colleague being embarrassed of me. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible. They're all actually pretty nice. So it's fine.
Absolutely. So, but a big part of my process was hitting my own wall of expectation and opening up other people into my process and opening up. So, like asking for different kinds of support with friends, moving my body in different ways. Like I would talk, write it. And all of these ways I realized to kind of deal with my own productivity pressure were just ways of feeling like myself again and feeling less like a machine. We already have the spirit of what we want to do in us. And when it starts to feel like it's completely impossible, we just have to try less hard and open up our peripherals to remembering that we're already enough. Our presence is already there.
This is my very last question. Because you're a spiritual director and you help people dig out their like gentler self. What's the nicest thing you could tell yourself or tell somebody else to help them get back into that kind of space? What do you tell yourself anyway, Lovey? I have a guess.
I'd love to hear your guess, but I'll offer mine first. You don't have to do anything more. The presence you have when you're feeling the most like yourself, whether that's playing with your dog or that moment when you get in the car and you turn on the radio, or when you're talking with a friend for a minute, that really gets you. That presence is who you really are. And if you trust that, then what might your
How can you feel?
To-do list mean? If you did nothing else but be present to yourself and the people around you, you would get as much done. You would move the needle, to use corporate speak, more than anything else you could add to your to-do list. One of the reasons you are such a good podcast host is because your quality of presence here is authentic to who you are. And you enjoy it. You were saying you would do it even without the audience because it gives you, because you are connected to your own curiosity in that moment. You could ask, you can ask all the right questions and the impact would be very different.
Yeah. Huh. It's also hard to trick people into spending time with me if they don't think it's going to be available to the wider audience. So
there are those logistics. That's true. I'm curious what you thought I was going to say.
It just reminded me of the thing you said to me that I kept in my, when I was getting very frantic and my like doing really kicked up 12 notches. You sent me the loveliest note that just said, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved. You will not disappear. You are here. I think that kind of did it.
It's still true.
You done something beautiful, honey. It's so nice to talk to you about it.
Thank you.